Hey guys, what's up? This is What the Tech. Today we'll be checking out 5G and more specifically millimeter waves and how they will affect 5G's eventual rollout throughout the country. Let's check it out. Starting off the bat, we got to build a little background about 5G right now in order to have some kind of baseline understanding and then build up from there. 5G is the next generational standard that ISPs are trying to roll out and get working all at the same time. Now, at the time of recording, 5G is pretty much really buzzwordy and not a lot of people actually understand what 5G really is. But if you're read up on the matter or if you've seen some videos about it, you may come away knowing at least three main things, or three main takeaways actually. One, that it's really fast. Two, that the range is pretty abysmal. And three, that it can be blocked by almost anything. And why is that, you may ask? Well, if it comes down to it, it really is just the physics of it all. There's more to 5G aside from just a 4+1G kind of situation. The generational jump between technologies of 4 and 5G is immense. If we're looking at 5G right now, and I mean real 5G, not that stuff AT&T is trying to push onto you like 5GE, it's built on the backbone of millimeter wavelengths. For those of you who took a physics class or astronomy class, if you remember a picture where they showed the electromagnetic spectrum, millimeter wavelengths exist within a section called extremely high frequencies. And inherent within those properties of millimeter wavelengths, we can actually see and explain why the transfer speeds of data is so high, why range sucks so much, as well as why anything can block it. Without getting too much into the weeds here, extremely high frequencies, which is along the electromagnetic spectrum, is the highest frequency we can get to without pushing or creeping into infrared territory. Now, the size of the wavelengths that millimeter waves will use range between 10 millimeters to 1 millimeter. That's really small. And this is important to remember because if you just follow up and down the electromagnetic spectrum, the higher the frequency, the more data you can send out. But the higher the frequency means the range is going to suffer more and more and more exponentially. This general rule here can be easily remembered, honestly, thanks to our Wi-Fi routers. Most people nowadays have a router that support 2 or tri-band networks, one that's 2.4 gigahertz and two that are 5 gigahertz. And without really thinking about it, you may have noticed that the 2.4 gigahertz one may not be as fast, but is more stable and go farther, typically covering the entire house or apartment you live in. While the 5 gigahertz one is tremendously faster, but the range isn't as great as the 2.4 one is. That kind of scenario is kind of like what 4G and 5G is. 5G is tremendously faster, but the range just isn't there. Now, to look into why the range isn't quite there, we have to look into the properties of millimeter waves. The extremely high frequency wavelengths have very high atmospheric attenuation properties. Attenuation means the gradual loss of intensity of a source of light. Basically, the signal drops off in a very short distance due to the gases in our atmosphere. Now, because of that, 5G cannot be used for beyond line of sight data transfer, necessitating a lot more 5G cell tower nodes to be deployed. Now, because of that, 5G cannot be used for beyond line of sight data transfer, necessitating a lot more 5G cell tower nodes to be deployed across a given market to make sure that there's always at least one nearby you, ideally with a clear line of sight with the device you're trying to use it with. Now, couple that with the fact that raindrops, water from the sky, can range between 0.1 to 5 millimeters. 5G signals can literally be drowned out from rain, which is naturally occurring. This represents a clear hiccup that's going to affect 5G's usage in the real world. And now this goes to the last point that you may have questions about. How come almost anything can block it? By now, there are a plethora of videos out there showing that just having one person or a car blocking the path between a phone and a 5G tower can instantly drop you between 5G back to LTE. And there's a very simple explanation why for this. Again, this relates back to the wavelength. If we look at 4G now, depending where you live in the world, the size of the wavelength, and remember, these are invisible, so these are kind of hard to imagine, but bear with me here. The average size of a wavelength for 4G frequencies, depending, again, where you are in the world, can range between 0.4 meters, so almost 50 centimeters, down to 0.08 meters, so around 8 centimeters. That's quite an amount of difference there, again, scaling from how close you are to the tower to how far you are. But if we look at the almost half a meter situation there, the larger the wavelength, not only the farther it can go, but the more penetrative properties it has. Nice. The more penetrative properties it has. 5G, for example, because as you remember, the size of the wavelengths are really small, 1 centimeter to 1 millimeter, it has very poor penetrative properties. That's what she said. Now, with all of this in mind, knowing that 5G in the end of the day is capable of doing very, very fast data transfers, but has all these glaring issues, that's why ISPs and telecoms are going to need to invest and deploy a metric shit ton of 5G nodes. It's going to be pretty much everywhere, from the city to the suburbs, spaced between 500 to 1,000 feet in order to maintain connections all the time. Of course, these nodes would be drastically smaller compared to 4G towers, but they'll still be relatively large compared to humans. So with that in mind, they'll most likely be attached on top of power poles, buildings, and maybe on the ground in combo designs with mailboxes. Using data from 2018, there was an increase of small cells deployed of around 550%. That's from 13,000 to 86,000. It's estimated by 2026 there will be around 800,000 small cells deployed in the US alone. These numbers are from the Cellular Telecommunications Industry Association in their The State of Wireless report at the end of 2018. Now, it goes without saying, this is going to take some time to roll out. We won't really see 5G deployed to most of the country yet for quite some time, and it's already going to take a lot of investment just to get it into just large cities that are in the US or elsewhere in the world. I found this pretty cool article by the Dallas magazine that just sheds a little light for those who are curious how much small nodes are required for a city. It is believed that the city of Dallas, Texas will need some 10,000 small cell sites. All this is due to mmWave, and before you know it, we'll be surrounded by these little small towers blasting extremely high frequency wavelengths at our phones and other things. By the way, just want to put this in the end because I feel as if I wouldn't be proud of myself unless I said this. 5G does not cause cancer. Well, that's it folks. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.